Hannah Brooks arrived early that morning at the renowned Whitmore Gallery, clutching her bucket and mop with hands that had long grown used to quiet labor. The gallery's walls shimmered under bright, artificial light, reflecting the sleek, upscale ambience prepared for tonight's exclusive unveiling. Around her, sharply dressed staff and well-heeled patrons moved with confident ease, their hushed conversations weaving a tapestry of refined anticipation. Her plain uniform and simple shoes marked her clearly as an outsider in this world of polished surfaces and expensive tastes. Respectfully, Hannah kept to the margins, sweeping carefully along the marble floors and wiping smudges from the tall windows. Her gaze often flicked to the exhibition's centerpiece, a fragile, intricate sculpture of glass and metal standing proudly on its pedestal, cordoned off with velvet ropes. The delicate artwork caught the light, sparkling against the muted backdrop of the gallery's pristine whiteness. As she worked, a sudden, crashing sound shattered the calm. All heads whipped toward the centerpiece as the sculpture exploded into countless glittering fragments on the glossy floor. Gasps and startled murmurs rippled through the room like an electric current. Frozen momentarily by shock, Hannah turned instinctively toward the source of the disturbance. Her moment of relief was brief. Mrs. Clifton, a stately woman known for her influence among the gallery's elite, pointed a trembling finger at Hannah. "It was her," she declared sharply, voice cutting through the silence. "I saw her near the sculpture just before it fell." Her accusation hung heavy in the air, drawing immediate murmurs and glances filled with thinly disguised disdain. Hannah's protests were drowned out. The gallery manager approached with a firm expression. "You must apologize for this carelessness," he commanded. Escorted from the gallery amid whispered judgments and cold stares, Hannah's heart pounded as she left, innocence clinging to her like a fragile shadow beneath the weight of blame. Hannah sank heavily into the worn wooden chair of her tiny apartment, the door clicking softly behind her. The evening air filtered through the single cracked window, carrying faint sounds of the city beyond, a distant siren, the murmur of passing cars, and the constant hum of life that felt so far removed from the gallery's marble halls and sparkling chandeliers. She barely noticed. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her cleaning supplies, the weight of the day pressing down on her chest like a physical force. Her mind kept replaying the scene, the sudden crash, the stunned silence, and then the pointed finger accusing her as if she were a careless child rather than the careful employee she had been for months. She had not touched the sculpture, not even come close to it, and yet the blame had been pinned on her like a brand. The manager's cold words echoed in her ears, ordering her to apologize, the smirks and whispered judgments from the patrons swirling cruelly around her like waves. She was humiliated, stripped of dignity in front of people who judged her not by her character but by her plain clothes and modest background. The apartment was dim, lit only by the faint glow of a bedside lamp covered in a faded lace shade. The small kitchen table held unpaid bills and a worn photo of a younger woman in a graduation cap, half faded around the edges. Hannah's eyes fixed on that photo, and memories came rushing back like a tide. She had once been that young woman, a brilliant student from a little town outside the city, full of dreams and determination. Back then, her world had been painted in broad strokes of possibility and hope. She had always excelled at school, her teachers' praise a steady stream that lifted her spirits. But everything changed when her mother's health began to decline. Chronic illness forced Hannah to leave college early, trading lectures for hospital visits, and textbooks for the uncertainty of managing medications and appointments. Her mother's fading strength became her new reality. Friends drifted away as Hannah took on shifts cleaning offices, stores, and homes, anything to keep food on the table and her younger brother in school. Those years had been a relentless push against exhaustion, where moments of joy were eclipsed by the weight of responsibility. She had sacrificed personal ambitions, her evenings filled with tired limbs and quiet resolve to make it through the day. But even then, she'd held on to a flicker of hope, perhaps one day things would stabilize enough for her to return to the path she had dreamed of. She remembered the first day she had gotten this job at Whitmore Gallery, the nervous excitement mingled with trepidation, stepping into a world so different from her own. She had worked twice as hard to prove herself, arriving early, staying late, always careful with every corner she touched or surface she cleaned. To lose this job, so soon and so unfairly, felt like losing a foothold she had fought so long to gain. Her stomach clenched painfully. She had barely eaten since the incident. Simple meals sat untouched on the kitchen counter as the taste of bitterness overwhelmed her. The phone rang once, twice. She could see the caller ID, a coworker from the gallery or perhaps an anxious family member, but the thought of speaking, explaining, defending herself felt impossible tonight. Instead, she stared out the window at the dim, flickering street lamp. Darkness seemed to settle inside her as fully as it did outside, a heavy cloak of helplessness that muffled all sound except the racing of her own thoughts. She longed for rest, but sleep refused to come. The quiet moments stretched endlessly, echoing the stillness she felt within. Despite the weight of defeat, a small part of Hannah resisted giving up. She recalled how her mother had always told her, quietly but firmly, that strength was not just about big victories but about standing steady when the world turned harsh. That memory brought a flicker of warmth amid the cold despair. But the next morning was no kinder. News of the gallery's accusation had already begun to spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Whispers in the grocery store, sidelong glances in the laundromat, they seemed to say, "She broke it. She failed." The world she had tried so hard to shape now felt unbearably fragile, every step forward shadowed by suspicion and prejudice. Hannah dressed carefully, pulling on the same plain uniform she wore to work, feeling its rough fabric like a barrier between her and the judgment around her. She considered calling the gallery manager to ask if she still had a chance to explain, but doubt tangled with fear. Would they listen? Would they believe her? Her mind, worn thin by hopeless nights and heavy days, found refuge in small routines, brewing tea, washing dishes, folding laundry, but even these tasks seemed hollow when her name hung in the air as a symbol of carelessness and neglect. Once, her life had felt like it was on a steady course, and now she grappled with the sharp divergence before her. She was caught between past sacrifices and future uncertainty, between the quiet dignity she clung to and the sneering doubt cast upon her. But deep inside, somewhere beneath the tremors of shame and frustration, a seed of resolve took root. She could not let this accusation define her. The gallery's walls might have echoed with judgment, but her truth was not bound by their narrow gaze. And though the path ahead was unclear and thorny, she knew she owed herself the chance to stand beyond the shadow of that shattered glass. The days that followed blurred into a haze of quiet doubt and restless nights. Hannah's small apartment felt heavier with each passing hour, the silence around her dense and suffocating. But amid the shadows of humiliation, a spark of clarity ignited when a fleeting memory returned with startling vividness. It was a fragment, a brief whisper she had overheard on the morning of the gallery disaster. She remembered distinctly, there had been two men, sharply dressed, speaking near the sculpture just before the crash. One had joked darkly, "He'll do anything for the spotlight," as if plotting some mischief. Then there was the image of a tall man in a finely tailored suit, lingering unusually close to the sculpture, his posture relaxed but oddly calculated. The timeline didn't add up to the gallery's accusation against her. An uncomfortable doubt stirred deep within her. Heart pounding, Hannah realized she couldn't let it go. She must seek the truth, if only to clear her name. Summoning every breath of courage, she reached for the phone and dialed the gallery's main number. The line rang, and then the manager's voice came through, professional but clipped. "Mr. Langley speaking." "Mr. Langley, this is Hannah Brooks," she said quietly. "I need to talk about the incident with the sculpture." There's something I remember, some details that don't quite fit. May I speak with you about reviewing the security footage? There was a long pause, then a sigh. Miss Brooks, the matter is closed. We conducted all necessary reviews. It doesn't change anything. I advise you to move on. The call ended abruptly. Hannah felt the sting of finality but refused to be deterred. She thanked him softly, hanging up with a heavy sigh. She knew she needed more, something concrete. That evening, after the gallery had closed, she found herself standing again before its grand doors. The iron gate was locked, but through the glass, light spilled faintly. She hesitated until a familiar figure approached, a security guard named Marcus who worked the night shift. He had always offered her a kind smile during her shifts and sometimes shared brief conversations about life beyond the gallery. "Marcus," Hannah said softly, "I need your help. There's been a mistake about the sculpture. I think the security cameras might show what really happened." Marcus studied her for a moment, concern flickering across his face. "You sure about this? It could stir up trouble." "I just want to clear my name," Hannah said firmly, meeting his gaze without faltering. Marcus nodded slowly. "Follow me." They moved quietly through the dimly lit halls, the polished floors gleaming dimly beneath their steps. In a small security office tucked away behind a row of canvases, Marcus settled before a bank of monitors. His fingers danced across the keyboards, pulling up footage from the morning of the incident. The screen flickered to life, displaying the sunlit gallery entrance and corridors. Hannah's breath caught as she saw the images play out. At first, the scene appeared calm, guests milling about, staff adjusting artwork. Then the camera angle shifted toward the centerpiece sculpture. There, standing close to the ropes, was the tall man she had remembered, the one in the sharp suit. He adjusted his cufflinks and glanced casually around the room. Without anyone else nearby, he reached out, appearing to lean on the sculpture slightly. Suddenly, a faint snapping sound echoed. The sculpture teetered, then crashed with a ruinous shatter. The man turned sharply, glancing nervously at the scattered shards before stepping back, his expression tight and guarded. Hannah stared, disbelief and relief washing over her. The footage matched her memory perfectly, showing she was nowhere near the sculpture when it fell. It was the clear proof she'd needed all along. Marcus kept watching. "No denying that's someone else," he said quietly, eyes locked on the screen. "You got solid evidence here." She nodded, heart pounding so fiercely it nearly drowned out other sounds. A flood of emotions swept through her, vindication, fear of what would come next, and a fragile hope. "What do we do now?" Hannah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to show this to the gallery management," Marcus said. "But be careful. Not everyone wants the truth." Hannah knew he was right. This was more than clearing her name. It was shining a light on the assumptions and snap judgments that had nearly destroyed her livelihood. That night, clutching the memory of the footage like a lifeline, Hannah slept for the first time in days, the weight inside her shifting just enough to allow a tiny thread of faith to slip through. The fight was not over, but she was no longer alone, and the truth was now in her hands. When the next major event at the Whitmore Gallery was announced, a glittering charity auction attracting the city's most influential residents, Hannah knew this was her moment. The grand hall where the gala unfolded was the very space where everything had happened. The same polished marble floors gleamed beneath ornate chandeliers, and the air was thick with anticipation and the subtle perfume of expensive cologne and floral arrangements. Hannah arrived early, not as a cleaner but as a guest who had something vital to say. She held the memory of the security footage tightly in her mind like a talisman. Her plan was simple yet risky: bring the truth into the light during this unforgettable gathering. Before the event began in full, she quietly requested a brief meeting with the gallery director, Ms. Caldwell, who had a reputation for diplomacy and poise. Unexpectedly, Ms. Caldwell agreed to see her in a side room near the entrance. "I have evidence that clears my name," Hannah said, steady despite the pounding in her chest. "The security footage shows the man responsible for the sculpture's destruction. I'd like to share it with you, and the guests." Ms. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "Hannah, this is a delicate event. Accusations can cause damage far beyond what you imagine. But, if you truly have proof, I must see it." Together, they stepped into a small control room where Ms. Caldwell had the authority to display media on the main event's large screen. Hannah felt the bright hum of anticipation grow in the air as the event began and guests settled into their seats. Moments later, with a quiet nod from Ms. Caldwell, the large screen lit up, projecting the footage Hannah and Marcus had uncovered. The crowd's chatter dimmed into a collective hush as the video showed the man in the sharp suit drifting near the sculpture just before the crash. The delicate glass cracked beneath his touch, shards shattered and scattered across the floor. Gasps rippled through the room. Fingers pointed, whispers multiplied. Many recognized the man, a well-known patron who was hired regularly to assist with event setups but had a reputation for seeking the spotlight. Mrs. Clifton, who had accused Hannah so vehemently, stiffened visibly in her seat. Her sharp gaze flickered nervously as the reality sank in. The accusations she had so confidently made were being dismantled before everyone's eyes. I must have been mistaken," Mrs. Clifton murmured as some attendees exchanged surprised glances. The crowd's murmur grew into an undercurrent of indignation. Several guests openly expressed disbelief at the rushed judgments cast upon Hannah. "She did nothing wrong," one whispered nearby. "This changes everything." The man in the suit paled, attempting to defend himself weakly, but the video evidence was undeniable. His voice faltered, and the room's atmosphere shifted from curiosity to quiet outrage. The elite, once comfortably seated in their judgment, now found themselves face to face with their own hasty assumptions and biases. Ms. Caldwell addressed the room crisply. "We regret the mistake made against one of our dedicated staff members. Let it be clear that integrity and truth matter here." Hannah stood quietly, her heart pounding but her posture steady. For the first time since the incident, she felt seen, not as a shadow at the edges of this ornate world, but as a person worthy of respect. Several guests approached her afterward, offering words of genuine apology and encouragement. The gallery staff, who had once avoided her gaze, nodded with newfound respect. The whispers of judgment faded, replaced by conversation that recognized her perseverance. Mrs. Clifton, humbled, approached Hannah later that evening. "I owe you an apology," she said, voice softer than before. "I judged too quickly, and it was wrong." Hannah accepted the offer without bitterness, nodding thoughtfully. The hurt was real, but so was the moment of grace. As the event continued, the gallery felt different, less fortress and more community, at least, for those willing to listen. That night, walking through the hallways where earlier she had felt so invisible and vulnerable, Hannah sensed a quiet transformation not only in how others saw her but in how she saw herself. The journey was far from over, but the truth had found its voice, and with it, a chance to reclaim dignity and hope. The unfolding revelation sent ripples through the Whitmore Gallery in the days that followed. The man in the sharp suit, Vincent Hale, a frequent patron and hired event assistant, found himself at the center of a storm he never anticipated. The gallery's leadership acted swiftly, recognizing the grave error in accusing Hannah and the damage caused by the man's careless behavior. Within days, Vincent received formal notice that his membership privileges were revoked indefinitely. The gallery's public statement condemned his careless actions, emphasizing their commitment to integrity and respect for all staff. Financial responsibility for the sculpture's restoration was now his burden alone, a consequence the gallery announced with quiet firmness. Meanwhile, Hannah's life began to shift in ways she hadn't dared to imagine. The gallery director, Ms. Caldwell, reached out personally, extending not only a heartfelt apology but also a significant offer. The gesture meant much more than words. Hannah was reinstated as the head custodian, a role with new responsibilities that included training and mentoring the cleaning team. It was a promotion that recognized her hard work and dedication, a chance to build a more secure future. When Hannah received the news, a complex mix of emotions surged through her: relief, pride, and a lingering echo of the humiliation she had endured. But it was hope that took root most firmly. The promotion wasn't merely a job change, it was a tangible acknowledgement that her integrity and diligence mattered. Weeks later, the gallery hosted a formal event to celebrate new exhibitions and the renewed sense of community among the staff and patrons. Among the guests was Mrs. Clifton, the woman whose harsh accusations had nearly ruined Hannah's reputation. This time, Mrs. Clifton approached her with a sincere expression. "I want to apologize publicly, Hannah," she said quietly, her gaze steady. "I was wrong to judge so quickly, and I regret how I treated you. You handled yourself with dignity that day and every day since." Hannah accepted the apology with a composed nod, grateful for the gesture but mindful of the pain that had passed between them. There was no bitterness left, only a calm acceptance that the hardest moments often taught the most profound lessons. The event continued in a warm, celebratory tone, but Hannah's mind wandered briefly to the moments when she had felt invisible and powerless. Now, the same hall seemed transformed, not just in physical space but in its meaning, for her and perhaps for those around her. As she moved through the crowd, heads that once averted now met her gaze with respect. The simple cleaner they had once dismissed was no longer just a background figure, she was a woman who had faced adversity and emerged with her truth recognized. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned and the lights softened, Hannah found herself standing near the entrance. The polished marble underfoot gleamed faintly, and the distant music of the event spilled through the grand hall. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the journey lift. Her head held high, she stepped forward into the night beyond the gallery's doors, not just cleared of false blame but standing tall, respected and seen. The quiet woman whose presence had once gone unnoticed had reclaimed her place, proving that dignity and truth could shine brightest when least expected.